The Ukrainian Defense Forces have encircled the Russian occupiers in 3 places in the Dobropillia direction. One encirclement is small, another is slightly larger, and the third is large. This statement was made by the head of the Assault Troops Directorate of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel Valentin Manko, in a comment to Radio NV. According to the officer, the enemy has been cut off in the Dobropillia area for 3 weeks now. In the Dobropillia direction, these hare ears were shot. The 425th, 1st and 25th regiments and their corresponding battalions were all in action there. Then came the second cauldron, meaning these hare ears have been cut off for us for about 3 weeks now. 3 weeks ago, a major operation to blockade the enemy and completely encircle them began. Then, if you recall, there was the hare's head. This operation was not almost, but essentially completed, the colonel said. The officer noted that the occupiers are currently trapped in 3 cauldrons, and further details about the Ukrainian military operation cannot be disclosed at this time. Recall, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenski met with soldiers participating in the Dobropillia counter-offensive operation. Since the beginning of the operation, Ukrainian troops have liberated 160 square kilometers and 7 settlements. Zelenski wrote about this on Telegram. It is noted that the president heard a report from the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, on the progress of the operation, the general situation at the front, and future plans. Step by step, the soldiers are liberating our land. Since the beginning of the operation, 160 square kilometers and 7 settlements have already been liberated, and more than 170 square kilometers and 9 settlements have been cleared of occupiers. Almost 100 occupiers have been captured, and in these weeks alone, the Russians have thousands of wounded and killed, Zelensky reported. Recently, units of the Defense Forces of Ukraine completed the clearing of Pankivka and surrounding areas on the Dobropillia direction. This was reported by the press service of the 1st Corps of the National Guard of Ukraine, Azov. According to the agency, thanks to coordinated actions of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the National Guard, Pankivka and neighboring areas come under the control of the Defense Forces. According to the press service, the enemy was pushed back from settlements and redeployments of Russian forces were recorded. 4 infantry brigades and 1 Marine Corps regiment to reinforce their contingent.
On the night of September 18th, units of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine attacked the logistics hub of the 810th Separate Marine Brigade of the Russian Federation, located in the Kursk region. The Special Operations Forces reported this. The strike hit an enemy supply base, ammunition depots, and a hidden location for the brigade's weapons and military equipment. As the Special Operations Forces emphasized, the 810th Marine Brigade, which is stationed in Sevastopol, temporarily occupied by Russia, is actively participating in offensive operations in the North Slobozhansk direction. In addition, the brigade's personnel were involved in committing war crimes, in particular the execution of Ukrainian prisoners of war. The North Slobozhansk direction is a direction that the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine introduced into its reports on June 16, 2025, due to the activation of Russian occupation forces in the border areas of the Sumy region. Starting June 16, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine will report on the progress of military operations in another area, Severoslobozhansk, in its daily reports, the General Staff said in a statement. On June 26, Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky stated that, based on the results of May and June, the enemy's wave of attempts at a summer offensive from Russian territory is faltering. As of this week, the advance of Russian troops into the border regions of Sumy Oblast has been halted, and the line of contact has been stabilized, the Commander-in-Chief reported. The port of Primorsk in the Leningrad region, a key hub for Russian oil exports, has resumed operations following a Ukrainian drone attack, Bloomberg reports. The outlet recalled that as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack on the port of Primorsk, 3 pumping stations transporting oil to Ust-Luga were damaged. Oil shipments at the port itself were temporarily halted. Primorsk hosts Russia's largest oil terminal on the Baltic Sea, from which 970,000 barrels of Urals crude per day were shipped in August. Recall that on the night of September 12, SBU drones struck Russia's largest oil-loading port on the Baltic Sea, Primorsk. Fires broke out at the port and at a pumping station, and oil shipments were suspended. Estimated daily losses to the Russian budget from the halt in exports could reach up to $41 million. Primorsk is a key hub for loading Russia's shadow fleet, which allows the country to bypass international sanctions and sell oil on external markets. Around 60 million tons of oil pass through the port each year, generating approximately $15 billion for Russia. Weekly seaborne shipments of Russian oil in the week ending September 14 averaged 3.18 million barrels per day, 934,000 barrels per day less than in the previous 7 days, according to vessel tracking data compiled by the agency. This is the sharpest drop in shipments since July 2024. Russian oil exports from Primorsk fell to approximately 730,000 barrels per day, and from Novorossiysk to 647,000. Shipments from Ust-Luga halved to approximately 313,000 barrels per day. Bloomberg says that a series of Ukrainian drone attacks have severely damaged Russia's oil exports, cutting Moscow's oil revenues by more than $300 million in a week. In total, 22.26 million barrels were shipped, which is significantly lower than the previous week's figure of 28.79 million barrels. The decline in exports has also had a direct impact on Moscow's revenues, with revenues falling to $1.28 billion from $1.66 billion a week ago. Bloomberg previously reported that drone attacks on oil refineries and port infrastructure could force Russian oil companies to reduce oil production. The destruction of refineries reduces their ability to process crude, and previously, excess barrels were exported. However, under the new conditions, oil storage capacity could quickly become full, forcing them to reduce production.